This is Diane McNaughton. Welcome to my watercolor painting channel. In this video I'm going to recreate one of my paintings. This is a painting I did of Alva Glen in Scotland. And it's lots of lovely still water and rocks. And what I would like to demonstrate is mixing paint on the paper and on the palette and using just three colours. I have three paints here: Aureolin, Alizarin Crimson and French Ultramarine, a red, yellow, blue, and I'm just going to paint this painting with those three colours. I'm starting with the hills in the background. I'm adding yellow and blue to create my variety of greens. The paper's dry for where I'm painting, but there's plenty of watery paint there to allow blending. I allow the colours to mix together. I lift the board a bit so gravity can do its mixing thing as well. Now I've got some distant trees there I'd like to make more bluer. Oh, those are green. Let me just wipe that off. Add some more blue to it rather. Just watery blue. And then I'm going to paint the hill on this side with my blue and my yellow a little bit closer, so darker paint. Now my paint is all still wet and I'm going to add some juicy darker French Ultramarine into that to donate trees and bushes that are slightly closer to us. But the paint has to be still wet to do this. Now I'll let it blend a little bit. Now the paint's gone up into that middle bit, so I need to soften that a little bit. Let me just paint there. And I'm going to wet my brush, damp brush, and I'm just going to soften that area there. I want to leave the sky and the water white because that's where my lightest lights are. Now I'm softening under the horizon line because I don't want a hard line. I want there's some reflections going into the water there. So it's a broken edge. Now I'm going to come down to the river area. There's some rocky bits on the left that I want to just suggest. So I'm going to just add a little bit of, well, just adding a little bit of red to the tree area here. I realise I haven't put much red up there, and you get lots of bits of red in the foliage. It's just so that it actually blends with the colours further down. This is my first layer for rocks. I will come on top of it with some darks. I'm leaving a bit of white of the paper where the sunlight hits the water in the middle there. Add a little bit of blue to that area there. So I've got the three colours mixing on my paper. Now let's come across a little bit on the right hand side. I don't want there to be too many rocks on that side. It's just mostly water with a few rocks peeking out. And I'll leave that nice little bit of white of the paper down that central area. Very light bits of paint. My next layer will add some darks to it. That's a little, I've just come over where I want it to be light, so let me just wipe that off. Now I'm going to wet my lower left hand side of the paper. And I'm going to raise my board and I'm going to drop in some juicy paint and let it run. Oops. Just blend that in a bit. So I add my blues and some yellows. Stronger paint into the wet. It's a bit wet and wet. It's kind of a wash, a blended wash I'm doing here. Now I want gravity to really let this run. I can even add little bits of water just to let it run down. The French Ultramarine is quite a granular paint and it will create some interesting effects. And now I'm going to add a little bit of red into there as well and let it run down. I'm not blending with my brush at all. paper and the paint and the water is doing its thing. I'm not doing it. I love painting like that. Now I'm just going to suggest a few rocks on the right hand side at the bottom here. I don't want them to be too dominant. It's just a bit of a riverbank close by. Watery paint. A few little rocks in the water. First layer is now dry, and I need to make a few decisions about what I want to do next. I think I need a few little rocks here and there. I need to put a few more darks in. I have now squeezed out some blobs of my 3 colours on my palette, and I'm going to mix some paint on my palette. I'm going to mix some darker versions of my colours. I find I can make stronger darks working this way. I drop in some darks on the horizon line, creating some tree shapes. I actually wet that area before I dropped in some of these colours so that I can get some sort of soft edges. If you want hard tree edges, keep the paper dry. But because it's in the distance, I fancied them still being soft. Now I'm going to come down into the rock area, and I'm actually going to wet where I'm going to paint sporadically to get some hard and some soft lines. So let me just do that so it's not all wet. And then I create some little interlinking lines and then soft areas, just so I make the impression of rocks rather than I'm not copying the rocks exactly. The shapes are smaller in the distance and then become slightly larger as they get closer to give that sort of aerial perspective. I leave some lighter areas to denote the rocks with the sunlight on them. I'm dropping in the 3 colours. Let's create a little bit of a water's edge here. When I mix the 3 colours, I actually get a browny colour when you mix red, yellow and blue together. So it creates my browns and purples. So I want it slightly darker coming forward. Now I'm going to just dampen it underneath the rock areas so that it blends into the reflections underneath. And let's do a little bit of dark areas on the other side, but slightly less emphasis. Also, I've wet it sporadically as well, so you get some hard and some soft edges. Let's do some more to do with the rocks and the water. Create another rock here. Gives a little bit of interest. Take your eye towards that. Then I just need to paint a few more darker shapes down at the bottom. Not really dark, but just a little bit more on the rocks, those rocks on the right hand side. again, sporadically wetting it and adding little bits of paint here and there. A little bit more up here. It's still kind of wet in places, so I can emphasize some of the lines there. I don't mind if it's slightly dry because it's not like a whole wet wash. And this is really creamy paint from those 3 little blobs. This sword brush is great for giving these lovely little thin lines. So I just look and see where do I need a little bit, few more dark bits across the painting. Check it out, see where I need to add. The darks tend to be much smaller areas than the lights in my paintings. I'm going to wet this area. I've decided I need it to be darkened a bit. I'm going to spray it. Just this area here. And I'm actually going to pour on some paint. So I've got these little tops of creams that I use. And just pour it on. And then I'm going to let it run down. Let's not do that one there. And I'm going to tip it this way and let it pour again. All right. There. Should I put a little bit of red in there? Let's just see, tiny bit. That's it. Some more glue onto that. I've got some paper here to catch the drips. Let's pour a little bit over here. That to go like that. There we go. We'll see what happens. It's really kind of a random thing, but I love doing this. It's absolutely gorgeous. It creates such lovely color mixes. The painting is now dry. Thank you for watching this video. It's free to subscribe to my channel. You will just get a notification when I release new videos. See you again.